A mother bear and her two cubs plead at the doorstep, urging the humans inside to let them in. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy our content. The first snowfall of winter blanketed the small secluded cabin deep in the woods of northern Minnesota. Inside, Emma Walsh cradled her 3-month-old daughter, Lily, against her chest, humming softly as the baby drifted to sleep. Nearby, her husband Daniel added another log to the fire, ensuring the bitter cold stayed at bay. Their cabin stood, alone at the forest's edge, miles from the nearest neighbor, just the way they liked it. "The storm's picking up," Daniel murmured, peering through the frost-covered window. Outside, the wind howled, bending the towering pines under the weight of snow and ice. "I should check the generator before dark," he added. Emma nodded, carefully settling Lily into her wooden crib. "Be quick," she urged, pulling a knitted blanket over the sleeping infant. "Something about tonight feels different." As Daniel zipped his coat, an eerie silence settled over the forest. The wind died, and even the distant cries of birds vanished. A shiver ran down Emma's spine, one that had nothing to do with the cold. She had lived in these woods her whole life, and knew that such silence usually meant only one thing: predators were near. Daniel paused at the door, his hand frozen on the knob. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Emma strained her ears. At first, nothing, only the soft crackling of the fire, then a low rumbling sound followed by what almost sounded like a whimper. Not the cry of a wolf, not the screech of an owl. Something larger, something desperate. "It's just the wind," Daniel muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. He reached for the rifle mounted above the door, just in case. Before his fingers touched the weapon, a heavy thud against the cabin wall made them both jump. Lily stirred in her crib but didn't wake. Another thud, this time accompanied by a deep groan, unmistakably the sound of a bear. Emma rushed to the window, her heart hammering. What she saw made her gasp. Through the swirling snow, a massive bear stood on its hind legs, one paw resting against the side of the cabin. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, sheltered from the storm, were two smaller bears, cubs young and vulnerable in the harsh winter. "Daniel," Emma whispered, unable to tear her eyes away. "There's a mother bear out there, with cubs." Daniel joined her at the window, his face pale. "That's not all," he said, pointing. "There's another one." Emma's stomach dropped. A second mother bear emerged from the trees, slightly smaller than the first, but just as imposing. A cub trailed close behind, limping. The larger bear lowered onto all fours and approached the cabin's front door. She didn't scratch or growl. No aggression. Instead, she simply sat in the snow, her cubs pressed against her for warmth. She stared at the door, waiting. The second mother bear joined her, guiding her injured cub forward. Together, they formed a silent, patient gathering at the doorstep. "What do they want?" Emma whispered, clutching Daniel's arm. Before he could answer, Lily let out a startled cry. The sound carried through the cabin and out into the frozen night. At the sound of the baby's cry, something remarkable happened. The larger mother bear tilted her head, ears perking up. Then, to Emma and Daniel's disbelief, she let out a soft, mournful moan, a sound that eerily mirrored Lily's cries. Emma's breath caught. "Daniel," she said softly, eyes locked on the bears. "They're not just here for shelter, they came for a reason." Daniel's grip on the window frame tightened. "Emma, they're bears. Wild animals." Emma turned to check on Lily, whose cries grew louder. Outside, the mother bear responded with another low, gentle moan. "Listen to that," Emma whispered. "She's answering Lily. I've never seen bears act like this." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, stress evident. "That doesn't make them any less dangerous. They could kill us in seconds." Emma lifted Lily, cradling her close. The baby's cries softened. "Look again," she urged. "They're not acting aggressive. They're waiting." Reluctantly, Daniel peered out once more. Snow fell heavier, nearly obscuring their view, but the bears remained, dark silhouettes against the white landscape. The injured cub whimpered, attempting to put weight on its hurt paw, only to quickly lift it again. The smaller mother bear gently nudged it down, licking the wound. "The little one is hurt," Emma murmured, her heart aching. "And look how thin they are. They should be hibernating, not wandering in a storm." Daniel exhaled. Maybe something disturbed their den. A hunter, or the storm. A sharp crack echoed through the forest. A distant gunshot. The bears flinched, but didn't run. Instead, they huddled closer, the mothers positioning themselves protectively around their cubs. "Hunters," Daniel muttered grimly. "Out of season, too." Emma clenched her jaw. Hunting season had ended weeks ago. Anyone shooting bears now, especially mothers with cubs, was breaking the law. She glanced from Lily to the bear family shivering at their doorstep. "We can't just leave them out there," she said firmly. Daniel stared at her. "Are you suggesting we invite 4 bears into our home?" Emma shook her head. "Not inside. The storage shed. It's insulated and empty except for tools. They could shelter there until the storm passes." "This is crazy, Emma." Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. The larger mother bear rose to her feet, turning toward the sound. She let out a low warning growl, then turned back to the cabin. What happened next left Emma and Daniel speechless. The bear stepped forward, then gently nudged one of her cubs toward the door. The cub stumbled through the snow, pressing against the wood. Then, in a move that defied everything they knew about wild animals, the mother bear bowed her head, almost in supplication. She looked directly at the window, where Emma stood with, "Lily, she's begging," Emma whispered in awe. "Daniel, she's asking for help." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then, with a deep sigh, he nodded. "The shed has a separate entrance. I'll lead them there." Relief flooded Emma. "Thank you. But you and Lily stay inside," Daniel warned. "Door's locked. If anything goes wrong, call the rangers and get out." Emma nodded, though deep down she knew these bears weren't a threat. As Daniel strapped on a headlamp and thick gloves, Emma returned to the window. The bears remained, their dark forms dusted in snow. The injured cub shivered, curling closer to its mother. Time was running out. As Daniel stepped outside, Lily sighed softly in Emma's arms. Outside, the larger mother bear lifted her head, ears twitching as if she could hear the baby's breath. Even through the cabin walls, their eyes met, human mother and bear mother. And in that moment, Emma understood. They were just 2 mothers trying to protect their young. "Be careful," she called, as Daniel disappeared into the snow. What neither of them knew was that this single act of kindness would change their lives, forever. His boots crunched through the deep snow as the wind picked up again, biting at his exposed face. He kept one hand on the wall for guidance, moving toward the front where the bears waited. Rounding the corner, he froze. Reading about bears was one thing. Seeing them from the safety of a window was another. But standing less than 20 feet, from 2 full-grown mother bears and their cubs sent a primal fear surging through his body. Every instinct screamed at him to run back inside. 11. The larger bear noticed him immediately. She rose slightly, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent, her dark eyes intelligent and wary. Daniel held his breath. One wrong move could trigger a defensive attack. "Easy," he whispered, though whether to himself or the bear he wasn't sure. "I'm here to help." To his amazement, the bear lowered herself back down. The second, smaller, mother remained huddled over her injured cub, watching him with equal intensity. Daniel took a slow step forward, then another. He pointed toward the back of the property. "This way," he said, knowing they wouldn't understand the words, but hoping his gestures might. The larger bear tilted her head, then looked back at her cubs. After what felt like an eternity, she nudged them forward. The injured cub struggled to its feet, whimpering softly. "Come on," Daniel urged, taking another cautious step toward the shed. "It's not far." To his astonishment, the bears followed, not charging, not threatening, just walking slowly through the snow, the mothers keeping their cubs protected between them. Daniel led them around the cabin, glancing back constantly to make sure they were still following and not getting too close. Inside, Emma watched through the kitchen window, Lily clutched tightly to her chest. Her heart pounded as she saw her husband leading 4 bears across their backyard as casually as if they were dogs. It was impossible, and yet it was happening. At the shed, Daniel fumbled with the keys, his fingers stiff from the cold. The bears stopped several yards away, waiting. He finally got the door open and stepped aside, gesturing toward the entrance. The larger bear approached first, sniffing the air cautiously before poking her head inside. She examined the space, then entered, her cubs close behind. The smaller bear hesitated, torn between her fear of the human structure and concern for her injured cub. "It's okay," Daniel said softly. "You're safe here." As if understanding, the bear finally stepped inside, her limping cub following. Once they were all in, Daniel pulled the door partway closed. Not enough to trap them, but enough to give them shelter from the storm. Then, he hurried back to the cabin, half expecting the shed to be torn apart behind him. But there was only silence. "They went in?" Emma asked incredulously as he stamped snow from his boots. Daniel nodded, still not quite believing it himself. "Like they knew exactly what I was offering." Emma set Lily down in her bassinet and began gathering supplies, old blankets, a container of water, some dried berries. "They must be hungry and thirsty," she said at Daniel's questioning look. "Emma, you're not going out there. We can't just leave them like that," she insisted. "The little one is hurt." She held up a small first aid kit. Daniel hesitated. "These aren't raccoons or deer," he reminded her. "They're apex predators." Emma placed a hand on his arm. "They're mothers, Daniel, just like me. They wouldn't be here if they didn't need help." Before he could argue, another round of gunshots cracked through the forest. Closer this time. Lily startled, beginning to cry. Emma scooped her up, soothing her gently. Daniel's expression darkened. "If those hunters find bears on our property..." Emma's face hardened. "Then we need to protect them." This time Daniel didn't argue. As Emma bundled up, packing the supplies, he simply grabbed his rifle, not for the bears, but to warn off anyone who came too close. Together they made their way to the shed, Emma carrying Lily strapped beneath her coat. The baby had settled, lulled by the gentle sway of her mother's walk. Daniel opened the shed door slowly. Inside, the bears had arranged themselves in the farthest corner. The mothers sat alert, watching the entrance, while the cubs huddled for warmth. The injured one licked its paw, face contorted in pain. "Stay behind me," Daniel whispered, stepping in first. The larger bear made a low sound, not quite a growl, but a warning. Daniel stopped, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Emma peered around him, breath catching at the sheer mass of the animals up close. Slowly, she unzipped her coat just enough to reveal Lily's face. The baby blinked in the dim light, scrunching up her features as she yawned. The effect was immediate. The larger bear's posture relaxed slightly, her dark eyes fixed on the human infant, and she made that same low moaning sound, the same one they'd heard earlier, but now, up close, it was unmistakable. "She recognizes what Lily is," Emma whispered in wonder. "She knows I'm a mother, too." Taking advantage of the moment, Emma carefully set down the supplies. She opened the container of water and placed it within reach, then scattered the dried berries. Finally, she pushed the blankets toward them with her foot. The mothers watched, wary but unmoving. The injured cub whimpered again. Emma's heart clenched. "I need to look at that paw," she said. Daniel shook his head. "That's pushing our luck too far." But Emma was already stepping forward, moving slowly, her gaze locked onto the smaller mother bear. "It's okay," she whispered. "I just want to help." The bear shifted uneasily, but didn't growl. Encouraged, Emma took another step, then another. When she was close enough, her stomach twisted, swollen flesh, blood, and a jagged fragment of metal embedded deep in the cub's paw. She clenched her jaw. "It was a trap," she told Daniel, voice tight with anger. "That's why they aren't hibernating. That's why they came to us. They're being hunted." As if to confirm her words, the smaller mother nudged her injured cub forward. It was the same gesture the larger bear had made earlier, a plea for help. Emma met the mother's gaze, and in those dark, intelligent eyes, she saw something that changed her forever. Desperation, trust. This wild creature was making a choice, placing her baby's life in human hands. Emma swallowed hard. "I need the first aid kit," she said quietly. "And I need you to hold Lily." Daniel hesitated only briefly before lifting their daughter from Emma's carrier. The larger mother watched, but remained calm. With steady hands, Emma began treating the cub. It whimpered, trying to pull away, but its mother gently held it in place with a massive paw. Cooperation like that defied everything Emma had ever known about bear behavior. As she worked, she felt the weight of 4 sets of eyes on her. But she wasn't afraid. Outside, the storm raged. Hunters moved unseen through the trees, but inside the shed, something extraordinary unfolded. An unspoken truce between species that had been enemies for generations, and none of them could know then. How this moment would ripple outward, changing not just their lives but the world beyond. The understanding of an entire community about the deep emotional lives of the creatures they shared the forest with was about to change. The trap fragment came free with a sickening pop, and the bear cub let out a sharp, pained cry. Emma quickly pressed a clean cloth to the wound, murmuring soothing words as she worked. The cub's mother tensed but did not interfere, as if she knew the pain was necessary for healing. "Almost done, little one," Emma whispered, applying antibiotic ointment before carefully wrapping the cub's paw in a light bandage. "This will help." Daniel stood near the door, cradling Lily while peering through the narrow opening. The baby had fallen asleep despite the tension, her tiny face peaceful against his chest. "Emma," he murmured, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There are flashlights moving through the trees." Emma secured the bandage and stepped back as the mother bear immediately pulled her cub close, inspecting the fresh wrapping with surprising attentiveness. The larger bear rose, ears pricked toward the door, a deep rumble building in her chest. "The hunters," Emma said, hurriedly gathering her supplies. "They must be tracking the bears." Daniel passed Lily back to her and checked his rifle. "Stay here, I'll handle it." "Daniel, I'm just going to tell them this is private property and they need to move on." He gave her a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It'll be fine." Before she could protest, he slipped out, closing the door behind him. From the small window, she watched him stride through the snow toward the approaching lights. Rifle held casually but visibly at his side. Inside the shed, the atmosphere shifted. The bears were on edge, the mothers standing protectively over their cubs. The larger one paced, her dark eyes locked on the door. "It's okay," Emma whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring the bears or herself. Lily stirred, against her chest, sensing the tension. Outside, Daniel's voice rang out, calm but firm. Then came other voices, rough and agitated. The flashlight beam swung wildly, illuminating the snowy yard in erratic flashes. "This is private property," Daniel said, his voice clearer now. "You need to leave." "We're tracking injured bears," a gruff voice responded. "Dangerous animals. Got a right to protect the community." "Not on my land, you don't," Daniel countered. "And bear season ended months ago." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken threats. Then another voice, slurred and hostile. "Saw bear tracks leading right to your place. You hiding something?" Emma's pulse pounded. She glanced at the bears, now perfectly still, listening. Even the injured cub had stopped whimpering, as if instinctively aware of the need for silence. "The only thing on my property is my wife and infant daughter," Daniel said coldly. "And I don't appreciate armed men trespassing near them." In the middle of the night, the confrontation escalated. Voices rose. Emma clutched Lily tighter, willing Daniel to convince them to leave. The shed suddenly felt too small, too fragile. Then, a sharp crack. Not a gunshot, but the unmistakable sound of a punch landing. Emma gasped, her heart leaping as the scuffle broke out. Shadows wrestled in the snow. The larger mother bear reacted, instantly surging toward the door. "No," Emma hissed, stepping in front of her. "You'll make it worse." Amazingly, the bear stopped, her massive body trembling with tension. Their eyes met, human and bear, and Emma saw the same protective instinct blazing in those dark depths that she felt in her own chest. "Trust me," she whispered. Outside, the fight ended. Daniel now stood over one of the hunters, who was sprawled in the snow. The other two men backed away, uncertain. "Get off my property," Daniel ordered, his voice ringing through the cold night. "Now, or the next call I make won't be to ask nicely." The fallen man scrambled up, snatching his dropped rifle. For a terrifying moment, Emma thought he might raise it. Instead, he spat into the snow. "This ain't over," he growled. "Those bears are killers. When they maul someone, it'll be on you." "Those bears were nowhere near my property," Daniel lied smoothly. "You're tracking shadows." The hunters hesitated, then retreated. Their flashlight beams bobbed through the trees, disappearing into the dark. Only when they were gone did Daniel return to the shed. A cut above his eye dripped blood into the snow. "Are you hurt?" Emma asked as he stepped inside. "Just a scratch." He touched his brow, surprised at the blood. "They're gone for now, but they might come back with more people." The bears had settled somewhat, though they remained alert. The injured cub examined its bandaged paw with curiosity, while the others watched Daniel with something eerily close to concern. "We need to call the ranger station," Emma said. "Report the illegal hunting." Daniel nodded, but his expression was troubled. "Even if we do? What then? Rangers can't relocate bears in the middle of a snowstorm, and if they find out we've taken them in..." He didn't need to finish. "Taking in wild predators could mean heavy fines, or worse. We can't turn them out," Emma insisted. "Not with those men still hunting them." As they debated their options, a soft sound drew their attention. The larger mother bear stepped forward, moving with surprising gentleness. Stopping a few feet away, she did something that left them stunned. She nudged the water container Emma had brought, pushing it toward Daniel's feet. It was such a human-like gesture of offering that they could only stare. Then, just as deliberately, she turned and settled back down with her cubs. "Did she just thank you?" Daniel asked incredulously. Emma nodded, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she had just seen. "I think she did." They lingered, watching as the bears slowly relaxed. The mothers took turns drinking, then encouraged their cubs to do the same. They nibbled the dried berries but ate sparingly, as if saving them for true need. When Emma and Daniel finally left the shed, making sure the door was secure but still open enough to keep the bears from feeling trapped, the storm had eased. Snow fell gently now, and patches of stars peeked through breaks in the clouds. Back in the cabin, they put Lily to bed and tended to Daniel's cut. Neither spoke much, both still processing the extraordinary events of the night. "What do we do tomorrow?" Daniel finally asked. Emma gazed out the window toward the shed barely visible in the darkness. "We help them," she said simply, "for as long as they need it." Daniel didn't argue. He had seen enough to know something profound was unfolding, something that defied explanation, but demanded respect. As they prepared for bed, exhausted from the tension and wonder of the evening, neither noticed the faint lights that had reappeared. At the forest's edge, the hunters had not gone far, and they had not given up. The tracks crisscrossed the property in a way that looked deliberate. Emma dressed quickly, pulling on her boots and coat before making her way to the shed. The snow was deep, crunching underfoot, and still falling in soft flurries. The shed door remained as they had left it, partially open. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward cautiously. "Hello?" She called softly, peering inside. The shed was empty. The blankets in the corner were rumpled, the water container knocked over. The bears were gone. Disappointment settled in her chest. She knew it was irrational. They were wild animals after. At least it was safer for them to have moved on, away from the hunters. Still, she had hoped. She turned back toward the cabin, but something caught her eye. Scratches, deep grooves carved into the wooden wall. Emma frowned and stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. These weren't random claw marks, the kind left behind when bears sharpened their nails. No, these had a pattern, 5 parallel lines drawn with precision. Beneath them, a rough circle. And beside that, something unmistakable, a crude but clear drawing of a cabin. Her breath caught. Trembling fingers traced the grooves. This wasn't random. This was a message. "Daniel," she called, voice rising with urgency. "Daniel, come see this." He appeared in the cabin doorway, Lily bundled in his arms. "What is it?" "They're gone, but you need to see this." Daniel joined her in the shed, his brow furrowing as he studied the markings. "Is that a map?" Emma nodded. "I think so. 5 lines, maybe a landmark, a road or a creek. Then the circle, which could be an area, and the cabin. That's us." Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You think bears drew a map?" His voice held skepticism, but his eyes never left the markings. "I don't know how else to explain it," Emma murmured. She ran her hand over the grooves again, heart pounding. "This isn't random, Daniel. They're trying to tell us something." They studied the crude design, trying to make sense of it. The 5 parallel lines, if they represented a road, the closest one was the old logging road, about 3 miles east. Emma remembered it crossed a stream in 5 places. "If that's the logging road," Daniel said slowly, "and this circle marks something nearby." "There's an old quarry out that way," Emma said, the memory clicking into place. "It was abandoned years ago. It has deep pits, caves carved into the rock face. A perfect place for a den," Daniel finished. They looked at each other, realization dawning. The bears hadn't just come here seeking shelter from a storm or hunters. They had come to them, and now they were showing them where they lived. "Why?" Daniel muttered. "Why lead us to their den?" Before Emma could answer, a distant sound reached them. Engines, multiple growing louder. They turned toward the forest. A caravan of ATVs and snowmobiles rumbled toward them, headlights slicing through the trees. At least 6 or 7 vehicles. Men, with rifles. "The hunters," Daniel said grimly. "They brought reinforcements." Emma felt a cold chill creep up her spine. The bears had left the shed, but if they had taken the time to leave this message, they couldn't have gone far. Not if they wanted to be found. And now the hunters were coming. Armed and determined, she turned to Daniel, heart pounding. "We need to warn them," Daniel stared at her. "Warn the bears?" "Yes." A beat of silence. Then incredulously, "Emma, how exactly do you plan to do that?" "I don't know." She was already moving, heading toward the cabin. "But they trusted us enough to show us where they live. We can't let those men find them." Inside, she grabbed a bag and started filling it. Medical supplies for the injured cub, food, water, a map of the area. Daniel followed, still holding Lily, his expression torn between concern and something else. "You want to go to their den?" he said. It wasn't a question. Emma zipped the bag. "If we take the snowmobile, we can get there first. We can lead them somewhere safer before the hunters find them. Or we could call the rangers," Daniel countered. "Report the illegal hunting and let them handle it." Emma shook her head. "By the time the rangers get here, it could be too late." She turned, taking Lily from his arms and pressing a kiss to her soft cheek. "I'm not asking you to understand, but I have to try." Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then, with a sigh, he ran a hand through his hair. "We'll take Lily to Sarah's," he said finally, naming their closest neighbor 5 miles down the road. "Then we'll go to the quarry. Together." Relief flooded through Emma. She hadn't wanted to say it, but she'd been prepared to go alone if necessary. "Thank you." They bundled Lily into her warmest clothes, packed her diaper bag, and secured her in the truck. As Daniel started the engine, Emma took one last look at the shed. 5 lines, a circle, a cabin, a message from one mother to another. "We're coming," she whispered. "Hold on." The drive to Sarah's took longer than usual with the snow-covered roads. By the time they had dropped off Lily with a hasty excuse about checking storm damage and circled back toward the quarry on their snowmobile, Nearly 2 hours had passed. The hunters were close, spreading through the forest. Daniel maneuvered, the snowmobile expertly through the trees, following the route they had deciphered from the bear's message. Emma clung to his back, scanning the landscape for any sign of them. The quarry came into view, a massive wound in the earth, its steep walls blanketed in snow, dark openings dotting the rock face where caves and crevices hid. Daniel cut the engine some distance away. They continued on foot, moving as quietly as possible. There, Emma whispered, pointing. Fresh tracks, leading toward a large opening at the quarry's base, partially hidden by fallen rocks and thick brush. Bear tracks. They followed them carefully, ears straining for any sound of the hunters. The tracks led inside. Daniel shot her a look that clearly said this was madness. But he didn't stop her as she stepped toward the cave entrance. Emma swallowed. Then, softly, she called into the darkness. "We're here to help." A long, tense silence, then a familiar low rumble. From the shadows, the larger mother bear emerged. Her dark eyes locked onto them. Behind her, her cubs peeked out cautiously. Emma's pulse quickened. "The hunters are coming," she said, unsure if the bear could understand the words, but certain she would understand the urgency. The bear tilted her head, nostrils flaring. Recognition flickered in her gaze. Then, to Emma and Daniel's amazement, she turned and let out a soft chuffing sound. A moment later, the smaller mother bear appeared. Her injured cub limped beside her. The bandage was still wrapped around its paw. The cub's bandaged paw still bore signs of its injury, but they weren't alone. Behind them, more bears emerged. 3 additional mother bears, each with cubs of their own. 5 mother bears in total. 5 lines. Daniel exhaled sharply, the realization hitting him with stunning clarity. They weren't just looking for help for themselves, he murmured. They were scouts, representatives. Emma swallowed hard. The bears that had come to their cabin weren't just seeking shelter. They had been sent ahead searching for aid, and now the full truth stood before them. A family, a community, being hunted. The engines rumbled closer. They were running out of time. "We need to move them," Emma said urgently. "There's nature preserve 6 miles north. No hunting allowed. Rangers patrol it regularly." Daniel nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the bears. "And how do we explain to the rangers why we're leading a parade of bears through the forest?" Emma had no answer for that. She turned to the lead bear, the one who had first come. To them, and pointed north. "This way," she said clearly. "Safety." The bear watched her, nostrils flaring as she tested the air. Then, slowly, she turned in the direction Emma had pointed. One by one, the other mothers nudged their cubs into formation. The injured cub lagged behind, struggling with its tender paw, but its mother patiently supported it, letting it lean against her for balance. Emma's breath caught. "Daniel, they're listening to us." Daniel stood frozen, watching in stunned silence. Everything he thought he knew about wild animals, about the barrier between human and animal intelligence, was unraveling before his eyes. These weren't just instinct-driven creatures. They were thinking, communicating, trusting. The engines roared closer than before. "We need to move. Now," Daniel said, forcing himself back to the immediate danger. Emma stepped toward the lead bear, close enough to meet its gaze. "Follow us," she urged, gesturing toward the snowmobile, and then to the north. "We'll lead you to safety." The bear blinked slowly. A deep rumbling sound vibrated through the group, and then movement. The mothers flanked their cubs protectively, forming a tight formation as they started forward. Daniel started the snowmobile, keeping the engine as quiet as possible. "We need to go slow enough for them to follow, but fast enough to stay ahead of the hunters." Emma climbed on behind him, glancing over her shoulder. They were still there, 5 mother bears and their cubs, following them through the snowy forest. Every few minutes, Daniel would stop and look back, half expecting them to have vanished into the wilderness, but they never did. They stayed with them. The journey was grueling, the snow was deep, and the injured cub needed frequent breaks. During these pauses, Emma checked its bandage, adjusting the wrappings and applying more ointment. The other bears watched but never interfered. There was no aggression, only trust. Halfway there, Daniel said during one stop, glancing at the map. Then his expression darkened. But the hunters are spreading out. Emma listened. Engines, not just behind them, coming from the east and west as well. They're closing in on the quarry, she realized. They must have found the den. One of the younger mother bears began pacing, her distressed sounds cutting through the cold air. Her cubs huddled close, sensing her fear. Then something extraordinary happened. The lead bear approached her and pressed her forehead against the younger bear's, a gesture so gentle, so deliberate, that both Emma and Daniel were left speechless. The younger bear calmed instantly. Emma exhaled. They're not just cooperating, Daniel. They're supporting each other. Daniel's voice was quiet. Maybe. That's exactly what they are. Not just random bears sharing territory. A true community. It was a revelation that could reshape everything humans thought they knew about bear behavior. But there was no time to dwell on it. The hunters were coming. They pushed forward, changing directions to avoid the search parties. The forest thickened around them, giving them more cover but making movement harder. Daniel pointed ahead. There's a river. If we can cross it, the preserve is just beyond. The sound of rushing water reached them as they neared the riverbank. It wasn't fully frozen. Dark water surged between ice-crusted edges, the current swift and unforgiving. Daniel cursed under his breath. The snowmobile won't make it. We need another way around. The roar of an engine. Too close. Emma's eyes darted frantically along the river. 50 yards downstream, a fallen tree stretched partway across the water. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. There, she pointed. The lead bear had already seen it. Emma turned to Daniel. They came to us during the storm. They brought us their injured cub. They left us a map. She met his gaze. They're not just animals, they're asking for help. A new voice cut through the trees. That's crazy talk. They spun. One of the hunters had arrived, rifle slung over his shoulder, a sneer on his face. Bears can't draw maps, he scoffed. Emma didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone and held it up. Then explained this. She flipped through the photos, the markings on the shed, the precise lines, the unmistakable image of a cabin. Look at them. She pointed across the river. They're watching us right now, understanding everything that's happening. As if on cue, the lead bear rose onto her hind legs. Her full height was staggering. She let out a deep rolling sound. Not a roar, something else. Something. Spoken. A shiver ran through the hunter. Jesus, he whispered. It's like she's talking to us. She is, Emma said firmly. She's telling you to leave them alone. The standoff stretched, tense and unmoving. Then, a new sound. Sirens growing. Louder. Daniel exhaled in relief. Rangers! The bearded hunter cursed under his breath. Let's go, he barked to his companions. We don't need this trouble. Emma's voice was steady as they turned to leave. The season is over. If I see you near these bears again, I'll make sure you're prosecuted. The engines faded into the distance. The bears remained, wary but unmoving. Then, headlights swept through the trees. 2 Forest Service trucks rolled to a stop. 4 rangers climbed out, hands resting near their weapons. One stepped forward, scanning the scene. Mr. and Mrs. Walsh, she said. We got your call about illegal hunters. Daniel nodded. They just left. They were hunting these bears. He gestured across the river. The rangers turned, and for the first time, truly saw them. Emma braced herself, the tension in their stances, the way hands hovered near their weapons. Hold. On she thought, then she spoke. They're not dangerous, she said. They're just trying to reach the preserve. If those bears enter the preserve, they'll need to be evaluated, tagged, maybe even relocated, the lead ranger said. They're trying to relocate themselves, Emma countered. They chose the preserve because they know it's safe. All they need is a chance to establish a den for the winter. Across the river, the bears had begun moving again, following the shoreline deeper into the sanctuary. The lead mother paused once, turning back toward the humans. For a long moment she watched them. Then, silently, she slipped into the trees, her family following behind. The ranger sighed, handing Emma back her phone. "I've worked these forests for 20 years, she said. "I've never heard a story like yours." She hesitated, then shook her head. "But those photos—" Emma held her breath. "We'll need you both to come to the station to file a formal report," the ranger continued. "And we'll have to track the bears, for public safety." Emma's heart clenched. "Will you protect them from the hunters?" The ranger nodded. "If they're in the preserve, they're under our protection. And if what you're saying is true, if these bears really did communicate with you, then we're not dealing with something hunters need to shoot." She met Emma's gaze. "We're dealing with something science needs to study." As the Forest Service truck rumbled toward the station, Emma gazed out the window at the snowy wilderness. Somewhere out there, 5 mother bears were leading their cubs to safety. Bears who had trusted humans enough to ask for help. Bears who had shown intelligence, communication, even compassion, traits the world had never truly attributed to them. She thought of Lily, safe at Sarah's house, blissfully unaware that her parents had just witnessed something that could change everything. Humanity thought it knew about the minds of animals. One day, she would tell her daughter this story, the day the bears came asking for help, the day they discovered that the line between human and animal minds was far thinner than anyone had believed. Daniel reached across the seat, squeezing her hand. "What do you think will happen to them?" he asked softly. Emma smiled, a rare peace settling over her despite the chaos of the day. "They'll survive," she said with certainty, "and they'll remember us." As the truck wound its way back toward civilization, Emma could have sworn she heard it. A distant rumbling sound rolling through the trees, a farewell, a mother's voice calling across the boundary of species. 2 weeks had passed since that night. The Walsh family had settled back into routine, though nothing would ever quite feel the same. The ranger station had taken their report, logging the bears' unusual behavior and promising to monitor them. Scientists from the state university had visited, interviewed Emma and Daniel extensively, and examined the markings in the shed with thinly veiled excitement. This could change everything, one researcher had marveled, carefully photographing the crude map. Symbolic communication from bears? It's unprecedented. Emma had shared almost everything. Almost. She kept one detail to herself, that moment of understanding, the unspoken bond between her and the mother bears, the recognition between 2 mothers, transcending species. Some things were too personal, too profound for scientific scrutiny. On a crisp December morning, Emma sat by the cabin window nursing Lily. Snowflakes drifted lazily from a sky the color of pearl. Daniel had gone to town for supplies, taking advantage of the clear roads before the next storm. "Your dad will be home soon," she murmured to the baby in her arms. "Then we'll have hot chocolate and read stories by the fire. Would you like that?" Lily cooed in response, her tiny fingers curling around Emma's thumb with surprising strength. At 3 months old, she was already showing a distinct personality, curious, observant with a quiet presence that reminded Emma of herself. Then movement, a shadow at the edge of the forest. Emma squinted through the falling snow, her heart quickening as a large, dark shape emerged from the trees. The lead mother bear. Emma sat perfectly still, Lily cradled against her chest. The bear moved with deliberate grace, her massive paws leaving deep prints in the fresh snow. 50 yards from the cabin, she stopped. Then, she rose onto her hind legs, towering against the white landscape. For a long moment, she simply looked at the window where Emma sat. Woman and bear. 2 mothers, bound by an experience that defied explanation. The bear lowered herself back to all, and made a soft, chuffing sound. From the tree line, 2 smaller forms darted into the clearing. Her cubs. They were bigger now, their coats thicker, their steps surer as they tumbled in the snow. Carefree, playful. The mother watched them indulgently, nudging them. Back when they strayed too far, Emma's throat tightened, her eyes burning with unshed tears. They were safe. They were thriving. She wanted to step outside, to somehow convey the joy welling up inside her, but she knew better. No matter how deep their connection, she could not cross that line. Suddenly, the bear lifted her head, ears pricked. A sound Emma couldn't hear. Without hesitation, she gathered her cubs and disappeared into the trees, vanishing as silently as she had come. Minutes later, Daniel's truck pulled into the driveway. Emma met him at the door, Lily bundled in her arms. "You just missed them," she said, helping him with the grocery bags. Daniel frowned. "Missed who?" "The bears." She smiled, still shaken, still in awe. The lead mother and her cubs. They came to the edge of the yard. Daniel set down the bag, studying her expression. "Do you think they'll keep coming back?" He hesitated. "Is that safe?" Emma considered the question carefully. "They won't come too close again," she said. "They understand boundaries." She exhaled. "I think they just wanted us to know they're alive, that they remember." As if to confirm her words, a distant roar echoed through the forest. Not a threat, a farewell. That evening, as they sat by the fire, a knock at the door startled them. Daniel opened it to find Ranger Peterson, stomping snow from her boots. "Sorry to bother you folks," she said. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" They welcomed her inside, offering coffee, which she accepted gratefully. After a few pleasantries, she got to the point. "We've been monitoring the bears you helped," she said, wrapping her hands around the steaming mug. "Set up trail. Cameras sent tracking teams when weather allowed." Emma leaned forward eagerly. "How are they?" The ranger smiled. "Thriving. They've established a den system in the eastern preserve. The injured cub's paw has healed nicely. Barely. A limp now." Relief flooded through Emma. "That's wonderful." Peterson's smile faded slightly. "That's not why I'm here." She pulled out a tablet. "We caught something on camera, something I thought you should see." She tapped the screen, playing a grainy black and white video, date stamped. 3 days ago. A moonlit clearing. One by one, the 5 mother bears entered the frame, forming a circle. Their cubs played in the center. The ranger's voice was quiet. "Bears are usually solitary. Even mothers don't group together like this." The footage continued. The bears moved in sequence, rising on their hind legs, shifting, deliberately making sounds that seemed intentional. Peterson exhaled. "At first we thought they were playing, or establishing dominance." Her eyes met Emma's. "But now, I'm not so sure." "Watch this part closely," Peterson said. On the screen, the bears suddenly stopped moving and turned in unison to face the camera. The lead bear stepped forward, studying the device with evident curiosity. She sniffed it, tapped it gently with one paw, then turned to the others and made a series of soft vocalizations. What happened next left Emma and Daniel speechless. The bears began to scratch at the snow, taking turns, each adding to what was gradually taking shape on the ground. When they finished and moved away, the camera had a clear view of their creation, a perfect circle. Inside it, 5 smaller circles, and beside it, unmistakably, a simple drawing of a cabin. "They're communicating," Peterson said quietly. "Sharing information, working together." She pointed at the crude sketch. "And that symbol, that's new behavior. We've never documented anything like it." Daniel found his voice first. "What does this mean? For the bears? For science?" Peterson exhaled. "I don't know. The university researchers are beside themselves. They want to set up a long-term study." She looked directly at Emma. "They've even named the group after you two." Emma stiffened. "They won't disturb them, will they? These bears have been through enough." "Non-invasive research only," Peterson assured her. "Observation from a distance, no tranquilizing, no radio collars unless absolutely necessary for their protection." She hesitated. "Actually, that's the other reason I'm here. The university team wants you both to consult on the study. You've had interactions with these bears that no one else has. Your insights would be invaluable." Emma and Daniel exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. This was an opportunity to ensure the bears were treated with the respect they deserved, to help bridge the gap between human and animal worlds. Emma nodded. We'd be honored, as long as the bears' well-being comes first. Peterson smiled. Of course. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden bear. This was left at the station door. 3 nights ago, she said, handing it to Emma. No one saw who left it. Emma turned the carving over in her hands. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the details impossibly precise. A mother bear standing protectively over a cub. She ran her thumb along the base and inhaled sharply. 5 tiny notches, arranged in a circle, and beside them, a minuscule, painstakingly etched cabin. The same symbols, Daniel murmured, studying it. Peterson nodded. There's a small Native American community about 20 miles from the preserve. They've told stories for generations about bears with human-like intelligence. Bears who could communicate with people, if those people showed them respect and compassion. Emma's fingers tightened around the carving. You think they left this? Peterson's expression was careful, thoughtful. I think, what happened between you and those bears has touched more lives than just yours. She glanced toward the forest. The story is spreading, and it's changing the way people around here see the animals we share this land with. After Peterson left, Emma sat by the window, the carved bear clutched in her hand. Outside, the snowy forest stretched quiet and endless. Lily slept peacefully in her crib, unaware that her young life had already intersected with something extraordinary. Daniel settled beside Emma, draping an arm around her shoulders. Do you think she'll remember any of this? He asked. Emma smiled, leaning into him. Maybe not consciously, she said. But deep inside, I think she'll carry it with her. The knowledge that intelligence, emotion, and connection ran deeper in this world than most people ever realized. Outside, a gentle snow began to fall again, covering the tracks that led from the forest to their cabin, and back again. A path between 2 worlds that had, for a moment, miraculously touched. Spring arrived in the Minnesota wilderness in a riot of color and sound. The snow receded, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the soft earth. Birds returned from their southern journeys, filling the forest with their songs. Life renewed itself, following the ancient rhythm of the seasons. The Walsh cabin had changed in subtle but significant ways since the winter encounter with the Chihuahua bears. A small research station now stood at the edge of the property, a simple structure housing equipment to monitor the preserve. Occasionally, university students visited, treating Emma and Daniel with a mix of academic curiosity and something almost like reverence. The mothers and cubs have emerged from hibernation, reported Nadia, a graduate student specializing in bear behavior. She showed Emma footage from the preserve's cameras. The images captured 5 healthy mother bears leading their cubs into the sunlight, teaching them to forage for the first tender plants of the season. They all survived the winter, Emma murmured, satisfaction warming her chest. Nadia smiled. Completely. Even the injured cub. He's one of the most active of the group. She scrolled to another clip. The once wounded cub scampered up a tree, using his previously injured paw with perfect ease. Emma felt a swell of joy. They had made Denis. The months of research had yielded fascinating insights into the bear's unusual social structure. Unlike most bear populations, where adults were primarily solitary except during mating season, these 5 mothers had remained together, denning near each other, raising and protecting their young as a cooperative unit. We're documenting behaviors never before seen in wild bears, Nadia said, unable to contain her enthusiasm. Coordinated hunting strategies, sentinel posting, even what looks like deliberate teaching, cubs learning from adults other than their own mothers. But the most extraordinary discoveries had come in the area of communication. The bears continued to create symbolic markings, patterns not random, but placed with intent. Over 30 distinct symbols had been recorded, appearing consistently, enough to suggest a rudimentary form of written language. The scientific papers were cautious, careful not to overstate the findings. But in private, Even the most skeptical researchers admitted it. They were witnessing something that challenged everything they thought they knew about animal cognition. Lily, now 8 months old and crawling with relentless enthusiasm, had become an unexpected focus of the bears' curiosity. 3 times mother bears and cubs had appeared at the forest's edge when Emma had Lily outside. They never approached too closely, but they watched, carefully, intently. It's like they recognize her as a cub. Daniel had observed after one such encounter, they're keeping track of her development. That morning, Emma sat on the porch, Lily in her lap, basking in the warm spring sun. From inside, Daniel moved about the kitchen, preparing lunch. Then, movement at the tree line. Emma wasn't surprised when the lead mother bear emerged from the woods. Sage. That was the name the researchers had given her. But to Emma, she would always be something more. Sage had established a pattern of visits, never threatening, never approaching too closely, checking in, as if making sure the humans who had helped her family were still there. But this time, something was different. Sage was alone. Her cubs, now considerably larger than when Emma had first met them, were nowhere in sight. Emma's breath caught. Something was about to change. "Hello, old friend," Emma called softly, remaining seated to appear non-threatening. "Where are your little ones today?" Sage stopped at her usual distance, her dark eyes fixed on Emma and Lily. She made a soft chuffing sound, then deliberately placed something on the ground in front of her. With one massive paw, she nudged it forward a few feet before backing away. Several steps. Emma stared at the object, curiosity overriding caution. "Daniel," she called through the open door. "Could you come here for a minute?" Daniel appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "What is it?" Sage left something. Emma nodded toward the object on the ground. "I want to see what it is." Daniel frowned. "Let me get it. You stay with Lily." "No," Emma said firmly. "She left it for me. I can feel it." She handed Lily to Daniel. "Just keep her safe. I won't go near Sage." Before Daniel could protest, Emma descended the porch steps and crossed the yard. Sage remained still, watching intently but showing no signs of aggression. When Emma reached the object, she crouched down to examine it. It was a chunk of tree bark roughly 6 inches square, with deep grooves carved into its surface. The markings were precise, deliberate, 5 small circles surrounding a larger central one. Beside this familiar symbol was something new, a human figure, holding a smaller figure in its arms. "A mother and baby," Emma whispered, recognizing the crude yet unmistakable depiction of herself and Lily. She looked up at Sage, whose intelligent gaze remained locked on her. "Thank you," Emma said carefully, picking up the bark carving. "It's beautiful." The bear made a soft sound in her throat, then turned and lumbered back toward the forest. At the tree line she paused, looking back once, as if ensuring Emma had received her gift, before disappearing into the shadows. Emma returned to the porch, the bark clutched carefully in her hands. Daniel adjusted Lily in his arms as the baby reached for the object. "What is it?" "A message," Emma said, showing him the carving. I think she's telling us we're part of their family now." Daniel studied the markings, thoughtful. "The researchers need to see this." "They will," Emma agreed. "But first, I want to understand it myself." Over the following weeks, the bark carving became the centerpiece of intense scientific interest. Researchers compared it to other symbols the bears had created, analyzing consistencies and patterns. The university team expanded, adding linguists and anthropologists alongside the wildlife biologists. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Eleanor Wright, the lead scientist, said during a team meeting. "We're not just seeing tool use or problem solving. This is abstract symbolic thought, the ability to represent ideas beyond immediate reality, previously believed unique to humans." News of the discovery spread, first within academic circles, then to wildlife conservation groups, and finally, to the broader public. Journalists began appearing at the edge of the Walsh property, hoping for a glimpse of what the sensational headlines had dubbed the talking bears. "This is getting out of hand," Daniel muttered one evening, shutting the curtains against the telephoto lenses trained on their home. "They're treating it like a sideshow." Emma sighed, concern creasing her brow. "And it's disturbing the bears. Sage hasn't come to the edge of the forest in over a week." The ranger station increased patrols to protect the preserve, but tensions were rising. Some locals welcomed the attention and the tourism dollars it brought. Others resented the disruption to their quiet rural life. A small but vocal group, including the hunters Emma and Daniel had confronted that winter, spread rumors, claiming the research was fraudulent, the bears were dangerous, and the Walshes were orchestrating a hoax. "We need to do something," Emma said one night, watching Lily sleep peacefully, unaware of the controversy swirling around their family. "The bears trusted us. We can't let this harm them." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe we should consider Dr. Wright's offer." The university had proposed a formal research center, a properly funded, permanently staffed facility. The plan included expanding the protected area around the preserve, designating it a special conservation zone with restrictions on hunting and development. "It would mean more changes," Emma said carefully. "More people, more attention, but also more protection," Daniel pointed out. "And it would put the research on a legitimate footing, not this media circus we have now." Emma walked to the window, gazing out at the darkened forest. Somewhere out there, 5 mother bears were raising their cubs, teaching them the culture and communication that had developed within their unique family, teaching them perhaps about the humans who had helped them survive the winter. "Let's do it," she decided, "but with conditions. We oversee how the research is conducted. The bears' welfare comes first, always." The following morning, they called Dr. Wright. By afternoon, plans were already in motion. University administrators and wildlife officials moving with surprising speed to secure funding and legal protections. 3 days later, Emma was in the yard with Lily, helping the increasingly mobile baby explore the early spring wildflowers, when movement at the tree line caught her attention. Sage. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, to Emma's astonishment, came the 4 other mother bears, each with her cubs in tow. The entire extended family stood at the forest's edge, watching the human mother and child with quiet interest. "Daniel," Emma called softly. "Bring the camera, slowly." Daniel appeared, the researchers' recording equipment in hand, moving carefully to avoid alarming the bears. What happened next would later be chronicled in scientific journals, documentaries, and eventually, history books. Sage stepped forward and began scratching at the soft earth. One by one, the other mothers approached, each adding to the markings as their cubs watched attentively. When they finished, they backed away as a group, revealing their creation. A map, unmistakable, undeniable. It depicted the forests, the preserve, the Walsh cabin, and the rivers that bordered their territory. But there was something new. A large circle encompassing the entire area, smaller symbols scattered throughout, corresponding to the bears' favorite foraging grounds, water sources, and denning sites. "They're showing us their home," Emma whispered, awe in her voice. "Their entire territory," Daniel added, filming steadily despite his racing pulse. "Emma, no wild animal has ever voluntarily mapped their land for humans before." Then, with deliberate movements, Sage stepped forward once more. She added a new symbol to the edge of the map, a simple, crude representation, larger than the cabin. A building. Emma's breath caught. "I think," she swallowed. "She's acknowledging the research center. She understands what's happening." The implications were staggering. Not only were the bears communicating through symbols, they were demonstrating awareness of human activities. They were engaging in the relationship being formed between species. Sage looked up from her drawing, and for the second time, she locked eyes with Emma. There was something in that gaze, something deep, intelligent, and undeniably present. It transcended scientific understanding of animal consciousness. Emma didn't just see intelligence in those dark eyes. She saw wisdom. The moment was interrupted by the distant hum of approaching vehicles, the research team arriving for their daily observations. The bears withdrew swiftly but calmly, disappearing into the forest with practiced efficiency. Dr. Wright was the first to reach the yard, her eyes widening as she took in the intricate drawing in the dirt. "Is that a map?" Emma nodded. They made it together, all 5 mothers taking turns, and look. She pointed to the last symbol Sage had drawn. "We think this represents the research center. They understand what we're planning." The scientist crouched beside the drawing, eyes scanning every detail with growing excitement. "This changes everything," she murmured. "Absolutely everything." 6 months later, the Northwoods Bear Research Center officially opened, a sprawling but tastefully designed facility that blended into the surrounding wilderness. Solar panels gleamed on angled rooftops, capturing energy while remaining visually unobtrusive. Sustainable materials formed the structures, and elevated walkways minimized disruption to the forest floor. From the observation deck, Emma stood with Lily on her hip, watching officials cut the ceremonial ribbon. The 9-month-old babbled excitedly, pointing at the colorful flags decorating the entrance. "That's right, sweetie," Emma murmured. "Pretty flags, and look." She turned slightly, guiding Lily's attention toward the forest edge, where dark shapes moved among the shadows. "Your special friends came to watch too." Throughout the construction, the bears had maintained a cautious but steady presence, observing from a respectful distance, neither fleeing nor approaching the human activity. Emma and Daniel had insisted on strict protocols to ensure the bears were never disturbed or made to feel threatened. "They understand what we're doing," Emma had told skeptical officials and contractors more than once. "They're allowing this to happen in their territory. We need to respect that." Daniel joined them on the deck, slipping an arm around Emma's waist. "Governor's speech is finally over," he said with a small smile. "I think even Sage was getting bored." "Did you see her yawn?" Emma laughed. The lead mother bear had indeed been visible during the governor's long-winded address, sitting there, motionless at the tree line, occasionally tilting her head as if listening. She was probably wondering why humans need so many words to say such simple things, Emma mused. Their light moment was interrupted as Dr. Wright approached, accompanied by a tall, distinguished man in a well-tailored suit. Emma immediately recognized the university president, Mrs. Walsh, he said, extending a hand. "I wanted to personally thank you and your husband for making this possible. Your insights and conditions for the project ensured we approached this research with the proper respect and ethics." Emma shook his hand. "Thank you," she said, then nodded toward the forest. "But we're not the ones who made this possible. They did." The president followed her gaze, his expression shifting to something close to reverence as he spotted several bears watching from the tree line. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Truly remarkable." A flurry of activity near the main building signaled the start of the official tour. Government officials, donors, and journalists gathering to explore the new facility. "Shall we join them?" Dr. Wright asked. "The governor specifically requested you both be part of the tour." Daniel shook his head. "I think we'll stay here a little longer. This is a good moment for simple observation." Dr. Wright nodded in understanding and led the university president away, leaving the Walsh family alone on the deck. Emma settled into a comfortable chair, designed for long hours of wildlife watching. Lily squirmed in her lap, drawn to the movement at the forest's edge. The bears still lingered, quietly observing the human gathering. "Do you think they understand what today means?" Daniel asked. Emma considered the question, watching as Sage guided her cubs, now nearly adolescents, into a loose semicircle, positioning them for a clearer view of the humans. "I think they understand more than we can imagine," she said softly. "They've been watching us, learning about us, just as we've been studying them. The difference is, they started their observations long before we recognized their intelligence." As the official tour continued, Emma, Daniel, and Lily remained on the observation deck, sharing a quiet moment with the beings who had changed their lives, who were now changing humanity's understanding of intelligence. Then, without warning, Sage stepped fully out of the forest. Her massive form stood silhouetted against the green. With deliberate movements, she rose onto her hind legs, a posture that once might have been perceived as threatening, but now it meant something else entirely. She stayed that way for several long moments, gazing directly at the Walsh family. And then, she lifted one massive paw and placed it over her heart. Then slowly she lowered herself back to all fours. Daniel inhaled sharply. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emma could only nod, words failing her. It was a simple gesture, but so human-like, so full of meaning. It transcended every boundary between species. As Sage turned, leading her family back into the forest, Emma knew with absolute certainty they weren't just witnessing a scientific discovery. They were standing at the beginning of a profound relationship, one that could reshape the connection between humans and animals. "Forever. Goodbye for now, old friend," Emma called softly as the bears vanished among the trees. "Thank you for trusting us with your story." The research center would go on to document groundbreaking behaviors. Scientific papers would be published. Theories of animal cognition would be rewritten. Conservation policies would change as the world reckoned with new evidence of complex intelligence in non-human species. But for Emma, Daniel, and Lily, the true magic would always be that first night, that winter evening when desperate mother bears had knocked on their door, seeking help. The night that proved compassion, intelligence, and the love of family were never exclusively human traits. They were universal bonds, threads connecting all living beings who shared the ancient forests and the wider world beyond. As the sun set over the Northwoods Bear Research Center, casting long golden shadows across the clearing, Emma held Lily close and whispered in her ear, "Remember this day, Lily. Remember that the most important voices are often the ones we were never taught to hear, and the deepest connections." She glanced toward the forest, where a mother bear called to her cubs, her voice echoing through the trees. "Come when we open our hearts to understanding those different from ourselves." A sound that once might have inspired fear, now carried a message of shared wisdom. Across the fading divide between wilderness and civilization, between human and animal, a boundary that had suddenly grown much, much thinner,